Welcome back to Inspector Toolbelt Talk, everyone. Today we're going to continue our series on inspection report writing, something that I'm very passionate about. And every time I post a podcast about something inspection report writing, that topic, we get all sorts of great comments and then some people disagreeing, but overall, just a lot of interaction. You can tell that we as an industry are passionate about it, as we should be. This is what we ultimately provide our clients, is a written report of what we found. But today I want to talk specifically about ratings. So we may listen to this and say, well, I have my ratings all set, or, I got my ratings from, the school that I went to, the home inspection school I went to. But listen in for just a moment, because we're going to go over some finer points that could actually really help in the long run. And some of these things are my opinion, but most of these things are things that experienced home inspectors, inspection industry specialists, and mostly attorneys have helped us to develop in our rating system, and they're pretty simple. And if you take even just 1 or 2 points away from this, it could save you from a big headache in the future. These things can help protect us, our clients, and just help us write a much better report. So first of all, and I'll get a little bit of flack for this, I'm still a little confused by some in our industry not using a rating system. Some states even dictate that not only you have to use a rating system, but that what your ratings have to be. Like Texas is one of them, TREC. And by the way, if you're listening in and you say, well, TREC has our required rating system and there's a couple other states, still listen in, because there's some stuff that you can use as an addendum to your rating system. But ratings really help our clients because they categorize things for them. So listen, I use an illustration of a doctor all the time. I got a narrative from one of my doctors. I don't go to the doctor a whole lot, actually. I talk about it a lot on here, but whenever I go, I'm like, man, this is just like a home inspection for my body. But I got one, and it was just a narrative, and I still don't know what it means. But the doctor just looked at me and goes, you're fine. Okay. I really don't want to have to ask the question, am I fine? And I find a narrative inspection report causes most clients to stop and say, so is everything okay? Whereas a rating system, even if we use a mixed mode narrative report with rating, which is a very common one, then at least the client can look and say, oh, red is bad. That's red. That's bad. Green is good. Oh, then there you go. That's fine. It gives them some clear direction. Also makes our job a lot easier because we don't have to answer as many questions about it. And when something's bad, we just say it's bad. It's right there. It says it's defective. It's also very defensible in court and all this other great stuff. Again, I'm not an attorney. These are things that attorneys have told me. Always consult with your attorney, yada, 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 legal disclaimer. But here are some ratings and a disclaimer that I'd like to share with you, that if you can incorporate these into your inspection reports, great. If you have a variation thereof, great. But there's some fine points that I want to share with you. First of all, there's a disclaimer that you can put somewhere in your report. I like to put this toward the end in what I call the big disclaimer at the end. You can put it at the beginning of your report. You can put it somewhere before your ratings, however you'd like to do it. But I'd like to read this to you. It says, all ratings in this report refer to the property or item listed as inspected at the time of inspection. Any pictures used in this report were for the purpose of providing examples of problems and do not necessarily indicate the whole problem or all of the problems. Further investigation of every item in this report by a qualified specialist is recommended. The report represented a snapshot in time when the inspection was done and does not represent the condition or conditions of the home or its components before or any time after the inspection. So if you look in our transcript for this podcast, if you'd like to copy that, go for it. I do encourage you to run it by somebody with a better legal mind than mine. But there's a couple of things in here in this that has been very useful, and a couple of attorneys helped me refine this over time. I wrote the original, and then some others helped me. I have a lot of attorney friends and guys that I've worked with in the industry, guys and gals. Actually, shout out to somebody who told me to say not say guys so often, because we have definitely mixed gendered industry now. Years ago, it wasn't as much, and now it is way more. When I say guys, I say that to my wife and daughter. I'm like, come on, guys, let's go. So I don't mean it as excluding women at all. But anyways, so first of all, it calls for any rating, anything that gets added to the report as needing further investigation. So we'll talk about that word further at some other point and why we use the word investigation. But what that does is it puts the obligation on the client to get someone to look at it. I can't tell you how many times that one disclaimer has saved me. I can tell you the times that I've learned about it saving me. So, for instance, I called something out and they said, "You neglected to tell my client," an attorney called, "You neglected to tell my client to get this evaluated. Now they are in a harder spot and you're going to have to pay up." I said, "Well, if you look at this paragraph in my disclaimer at the end of the report, mine was actually at the beginning of the report. I'm like, it's one of the very first things that you have to scroll by. Even before you see the rest of my defects, you have to read this." And then it got quiet and that went away. There's been other times where basically it protected my client because the seller side was like, "Oh, well, home inspector didn't say this or that." And I'm like, "Well, actually, it says it right here. It needs to be evaluated by a contractor." Agents used to love that. They still do, because it protects their client and gives them a little bit of wiggle room to find issues or explore things a little bit more. So that's a great thing to have in there. Also mentioning again, even though it's in our contract, it's nice to be able to say this was a snapshot in time, does not represent anything before or after the inspection. We'll talk about that on a future podcast as to why, especially saying before is an important one. But just that, that becomes very defensible in court. An attorney told me, it's just like, you want to not be able to say just that it was in your contract. Well, that's buried in a contract. It's like, it's in the contract, it's in the report disclaimer, it's in 3 different emails that I sent, and it's also in all of my advertising. Did the client not read those 15 different occurrences? So that's a great spot to just slip that in again. I don't say slip it in, put it in. We want people to know that. We don't want to just hide it somewhere. So put it in that paragraph as a disclaimer. Also, too, we have a guest coming up who talked about this, making sure that we let them know that any photos in the report do not represent the entire issue. And that's for a very important legal issue. So, again, use that disclaimer or not. But the one thing that I like about saying that everything in the ratings need to have further investigation is that we don't have to write that a million times in our report. Imagine if we went to the shoe store and they said you were a size 10. "Oh, thank you for measuring my foot. I'm a size 10. Every time we turned the corner, they said, "You're a size 10. Okay, thank you. You told me that. Hey, you're a size 10. Thanks. You're trying on a size 10. And they're like, "Hey, you're a size 10. And finally, you're just like, just stop saying it." That's kind of what we do after every comment. If we write, "Hey, further investigation by a qualified contractor," it makes our reports annoying to read, to be honest with you. When I would teach my report interpretation course, basically teaching agents how to understand inspection reports because there's so many different variations of it, that was the one thing they would always laugh and just carry on about. They're like, "If I never read that line again in my life." Here's how I like to do it. I like to put it in each of my ratings. So I like to say at the end of the rating. So just assume that that's at the end of each one of these ratings that I'm going to read you. For evaluation by a qualified contractor is recommended. Poof, done. Then everything that gets that rating will automatically require someone to come and look at it. We don't have to write it a million times. Put it in that disclaimer. The only other time that I actually write it in a comment is when it's something big or something dangerous. So now I just want to re-emphasize. It's like, listen, guys, I'm not talking about a wood rot on the corner of a deck that nobody can walk on. I'm talking about, something that could start an electrical fire or just something that's a really big issue. So I will reemphasize it at those points. And when I do, I just make a note: evaluation by a qualified contractor is recommended. So that way, even maintenance items at that point technically require evaluation by a qualified contractor. And how an attorney explained it to me, why that's still important to put in and put in somewhere. Like, listen, we find a tiny little leak up on a ceiling. And that little leak is like, oh, well, okay, that's probably related to the valley. We're thinking, maintenance issue. It's, maybe there's a contractor there. And he's like, oh, yeah, I can fix that in 10 minutes. I'll just do it while I'm up there, $500. I don't know. This is just an example. Now, they get up there and it's not a leak in the roof, or maybe a attic AC unit with a little condensation leak or something. All of a sudden, it's a $7,000 pest infestation. Like there's nests and there's birds and there's rats and there's everything. And this is an exaggeration. Actually, that actually really happened. Fortunately, I called it out. But now we don't say, we're just like, this is like a small, little nothing maintenance issue. So we don't say evaluation by a qualified contractor. What's going to happen is the attorney for the buyer who comes to sue us is going to say, why didn't you recommend evaluation by a qualified contractor? Wouldn't this warrant it because of X, Y, and Z? And we can try to defend that all day long, but that's going to start to get really expensive because at the end of the day, we could have just said in our report, evaluation by a qualified contractor for even any of these minor issues, and then they'll protect us. I'm like, they should have gotten somebody to look at it. I said it right there in my report. But again, that doesn't mean we need to write it after every single line. Put it in our rating system. That's the beauty of the rating system. Maintenance item, boom, evaluation by a qualified contractor recommended. Client reads it once, they go, all right, whatever. And then, they never see it again in the report for maintenance items. But if something big comes up later on, it's like, well, I did technically tell you to do that. Now I'm going to get some pushback because there is the whole, well, you should stand by your report. I'm like, yeah, but I also can't see everything. I do stand by my reports. I'm very proud of my reports. But if I can't get into that attic, would I want them to have somebody to look at it? Sure. And you know what also has happened before? I've said that. And then while one of the other contractors is walking through there, they start reaching up and they're like, oh man, there's a rat's nest in here. So now they go and look and says, well, it says that somebody should look at it. So now my client can get either the price reduced or have the seller fix it or at least get out of the deal. It protects us and it protects our clients, but we just don't need to put it on every single line in the report. So one by one, here are some ratings that actually the attorneys helped me develop, and we would do this in a course. Oh man, we did this course, I don't know, a decade or more together, several attorneys. First one was functional. So a lot of us write acceptable, but here it's functional. I'll tell you why. It says performing its function and its condition is appropriate for its age and use. Although an item may be functional at time of inspection, and then it says further evaluation being needed, and will need regular maintenance and upkeep. A couple of things about this. The reason we do not say acceptable and we use the word functional, two very different connotations. So for instance, let's say, I'll use the example of a septic system because there's a municipality near me where you have to have the septic system inspected by the county. So now if I go and I do my own septic inspection, I say things were acceptable. They will come and they say, well, it's not acceptable when we did a bacterial test. They actually do a bacterial test. It's got to be a pretty gross job. So the client's going to be like, you said it was acceptable. They said it's not. But things like that can happen all over the house. I said the heating unit was acceptable, but the HVAC guy comes in and says it's not. So it becomes a subjective rating, which we do not want. We do not want a subjective rating. We want a direct rating. So acceptable can be taken a lot of different ways. Functional, not so much. So now they say, well, the septic system is not acceptable. I'm like, but it's functional. Yeah, but it's not acceptable. I'm like, I didn't say it was acceptable. I said it was functional. People are like, oh, okay, so it works, but they don't like it. Heating unit. It's like, I said it was functional, and the heating guy's going to be like, it is. It's just not what I would want. Okay, but it worked. So functional is a much better rating than acceptable, according to the attorneys. It's less ambiguity, more direct, and it just makes more sense. When I switched probably 17 years ago from acceptable to functional, I actually got less phone calls. And listen, we're talking about units of inches here. We're not talking about if I do this, this is going to blow my business into the stratosphere. It's going to be amazing. We're talking about games of inches here. This will save us an inch of trouble. But when you add up all these inches of trouble, it really starts to add up. Functional is just a better rating for things that work. It's functional. And that saved me with all sorts of different contractors. They're like, he said it was fine. I'm like, I said it was functional. No, he says, I'm like, read that. It says functional, not fine. Well, technically, but okay, yeah, it does work. Yeah. And then the conversation or their argument rather starts to kind of fall apart. Also, too, we are not code inspectors, and that's actually by law in several states, including my state. It says it's illegal actually in New York. It says home inspectors shall not inspect for code. So that kind of makes this weird thing where I had to put this in there, where it says the whatever we are inspecting is appropriate for its age and use. So if something is 20 years old but doesn't meet code, really hard to argue that. I said, well, it's appropriate for its age. So when they put this in 20 years ago, this would have been normal. Or when the quintessential HVAC guy comes and says, this unit is 18 years old, you have to throw this out. And they come and they say, he said we need to throw it out. I'm like, I mean, it was functional and it was appropriate for its age and its use. So that seems really subjective on their part. Functional is just a better term. And again, you can find all these in the transcript if you want, and feel free to use them. But again, have them checked out by an attorney, a lot of yada, 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 legal disclaimer. All right. This next one is I broke a rule, and I'm going to tell you why. Lax maintenance / unconventional. That's a weird rating, right? Now, that is actually not the optimal rating. And I'll tell you why. The optimal rating is actually deferred maintenance. So when you say something lacks maintenance, you are inferring that the owner of the property did not maintain it properly. And now you are writing stuff down saying that they did not maintain a bunch of things properly. They can get kind of tiffy about that. And while it doesn't open you up to great legal issues, because it's still just your opinion, it does open you up to some possible legal trouble according to the attorneys that worked on this. The reason I put lax maintenance, even though it could create an inch of trouble, so to speak, is because nobody knew what deferred maintenance meant. And if you look at the large national and internationals, we used to work for a couple of international firms, and we go out and do inspections on their commercial buildings and things like that. They would always have us use deferred maintenance. These moving companies that would move large people from large corporations from one part of the country to the other, they would always say deferred maintenance for those very reasons. But nobody ever knew what it meant. My clients would call and they would say, what is deferred maintenance? Who do I defer it to? Why am I deferring it? I'm like, no, it means they deferred it. I'm like, they're like, who did they defer it to? I'm just like, no, that's not what that means. So it's just a weird term, and I get why people were confused by it. So lax maintenance, people go, oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. They're peeling paint and lax maintenance. So it opens up to an inch of trouble, so to speak. I mixed it with unconventional. So lax maintenance / unconventional. So just because something is weird doesn't mean it's the worst thing in the world. You know what I mean? Let's be practical about it. It might be unconventional and we want them to keep an eye on it, but it's not, no one's going to die from it. It's the, just off the top of my head, the pencil used for a plunge lift in the back of a toilet kind of thing. It's just like, all right, that doesn't lack maintenance. It's not deferred maintenance. It's unconventional, but no one's going to die from this. It's just like you just need some new guts for the toilet. But this is what it's defined as: functional, but is in need of normal maintenance and upkeep, or is unconventional and needs further examination. And then obviously the whole evaluation by a qualified contractor. So the next one, this is my favorite. And this was actually something that I fought for a long time. And then when I did it, it finally made sense. After talking to a bunch of attorneys about it, It, it just made sense after I started using it. It's called marginal. It's defined as performing some or all of its functions, but not as intended, and or its condition is not appropriate for its age and use. Requires repair or maintenance to become functional or fully functional. Cost estimates may be required by a qualified specialist and is at the discretion of the client if estimates will be obtained. And then just some other stuff about estimates, because that's a big thing in my area. But why is marginal so good? Because sometimes things are not defective, but you just kind of know that they are. And it's not like it's lacks maintenance or even falls under the monitor one that we're going to talk about in a minute. It's marginal. It's like it's like a water heater. There was this one particular brand. It was like clockwork. 9.5 to 10 years old. Boom, dump water on the floor. I'd find them all the time at like 8, 9 years old, sometimes right at the 9.5-year-old mark. And I just look at them and I'm like, oh man, this thing's going to blow. And I'm like, listen, I cannot fail this because it's working fine. It's not that I cannot, it's just I would not if it was working. But I'm like, I'm going to put this in marginal. I'm like, get rid of this thing right at the beginning. And you know how many times marginal that rating has saved me? I remember an agent, his kids were buying a house and he only wanted me because of the pickiest guy around. So I go in and I find one of these water heaters and he, no joke, calls me 2 days after they close and goes, the whole basement flooded. My heart dropped because I thought he was going to be upset. He was like, I'm going to tell you all the agents in the area not to use you and blah, blah, blah. And he goes, I can't tell you how appreciative I am and how mad at my kids I am that they did not change that the day they moved in like you told them to. He's like, you said right there in your report, it was marginal, right on the edge. And that's really what it comes down to. It's a 24-year-old roof on a 25-year shingle, but it's not leaking yet. It's really kind of marginal. There's so many things that I find that are marginal, where I don't want to part it as monitor or functional. And I hate that when something is almost dead, we say, well, it was functional at the time of the inspection. I'm like, I still want to give my clients a bit of warning here. I want a rating for that. And marginal has saved me so much time and issues, and it saved my clients. I've had clients say, Ian, we moved in, that water heater, we got rid of it right away, or whatever else I told them. And it makes my heart happy because now they're protected and they don't have to worry about those things. The next one, easy one, defective. Not performing its function or its condition is not appropriate for its age or use and will require repairs or replacement. Easy. I always put in its condition is not appropriate for its age or its use. You've heard that a couple of times from different ratings. Again, sometimes it's still working, but it's not appropriate for its age. Maybe we have a 3-year-old AC unit and it's just clunking like crazy. And we're like, that's not appropriate for its age or its use. Or we have a ductless mini split and they have all these bits of hose coming out of there and it's not a model made for that. And they're trying to cool the whole house with it. Is it technically functioning? Yes, but it's not appropriate for its use. So I'm going to call that a defect. So that's good wording to have. And that one actually came from a home inspector who actually helped write New York state law. A super, super knowledgeable guy. Way back in the 90s was his peak of his career. And then in the early 2000s, he was part of the committee for New York State. And he had some really good insights on that. And the attorneys always loved his wording on that. Monitor. Now this one we're probably going to get some kickback on because there's some guys out there that don't like to use this. I've had good results from it and the attorneys like it that I've run it by. Monitor. These items did not seem to be directly affecting the major components of the home in any adverse way at the time of the inspection, but should be monitored to ensure movement, damage, or other issues do not occur and will likely require repairs over time. These items should be repaired as needed by a qualified specialist. So this is for things that haven't reached marginal yet. It's like, all right, I know that garage door opener, it's looking a little wonky, but it's effective. There's nothing moving. It's like, just keep an eye on it. And I've always liked that because then, I use monitor a lot because I'm like, these are the 10 to 15 things that I really want you to keep an eye on. Fix these other things that I mentioned, but keep an eye on these too. It's helped my clients. And to be honest, if I say monitor the garage door opener, it really saves me the phone calls 6 months later when it actually does break. We all hate those phone calls like, okay, monitor this dishwasher. It's looking a little old. And then the guy calls you a year later. My dishwasher broke a year after I bought my house. Well, how are you going to deal with that? It's like, okay, that's not my business. And I did tell you to monitor it. So I found that very helpful. The attorneys liked it too because it gave their clients warning. Not present. Now, listen very specifically to this wording. Not present or visible at time of inspection, so was not able to be inspected. Very important wording there. Not present or visible. Because one of the biggest things that home inspectors have gotten in trouble with that I've seen is when they say something is not present and then it is behind a box or something. So now people go and give them pushback for that. With the not present or not visible at time of inspection. So was not able to be inspected. Now they go in and find the water meter that you said wasn't there. And they're like, well, it is there. Well, I couldn't see it. Oh, well, it says it right there. Okay. This is good for diffusing situations. Our final one is an important one and probably the most overused rating. And that rating is hazardous. So I see home inspectors cry wolf a lot in their reports with hazardous. There's one report I looked at, everything was hazardous. Crack in sidewalk, hazardous. You could fall on that. Handrail did not extend within so far of the steps, hazardous. Wrinkles in the carpeting, you could trip on that, hazardous. And I'm like, there's like 30 hazards here. And actually one of them was a real hazard. One of them was like a dangling live wire at eye height in the basement. And I'm like, there was an actual hazard in there, but the average person, they cried wolf the whole time. So the average person is not going to know, is that like tripping on the carpet or is this going to burn my face off? It's going to burn your face off. So very overused. We would use it only when it met this definition. An imminent threat or danger to safety, health, or life of occupants of property. And in all caps, do not use until hazard is removed. A hazardous item is always considered defective. That's it. Very rarely would something go in as a hazard. Now, is there a balcony with a loose railing or rotted boards? Oh yeah, don't use that. That's hazardous. Like I said, electrical wires dangling eye height. Yeah, hazardous. If it's an imminent threat or danger to safety or life. And every attorney that would guest speak at one of our classes for this course, they'd all say the same thing, that they wanted the hazardous when it was only something that was actually hazardous, because it was very difficult for them to know what was an actual hazard if we were using that word all the time. So those are the ratings. We can see that they have benefit. We can use these as they're written if you'd like. Adapt them to yourself, and hopefully there was at least something that we could use to tweak things in a report a little bit. But I am a firm believer in using ratings and using ratings as I brought out here. But thanks for listening in, and we look forward to the next episode.